The wedding hall was filled with golden light, music, and laughter. Chandeliers sparkled above, and guests moved from table to table, chatting and smiling. The bride stood at the center of attention, her gown shining like a diamond. Everyone's eyes were on her. But at one corner of the hall, her elder sister sat quietly, watching. She wore a simple dress, and though her face was calm, her heart carried heavy memories. This sister was a single mother. She had come only because she still loved her family. She wanted to show respect for her younger sister's big day, even though she had often faced cruelty from them. She sat silently, hoping the day would pass peacefully. Suddenly, the bride picked up the microphone. She smiled at the crowd, her voice sweet and cheerful. "Thank you, everyone, for being here on this special day," she said. The guests clapped and cheered. But then, her tone changed. Her eyes turned toward her sister, and here, she continued with a laugh, "Is my sister, the single mother. The woman unwanted by anyone. Who wants to pick her up today? Anyone?" The hall filled with laughter. Glasses clinked, people covered their mouths, but the laughter only grew louder. The elder sister's hands shook under the table. Her chest felt heavy, but she tried not to show her pain. She lowered her eyes, wishing the ground would open and hide her. Then, her mother's voice rang out, cutting deeper than any blade. "She is a used product," the mother said, laughing loudly. "Still functional, but used. And she even comes with a defective son. Who wants this offer?" The crowd roared with laughter again. Some even clapped as if it were a joke. The elder sister's face turned pale. Her eyes burned with tears she could not stop. She held her arms close to her chest, trying to protect herself from the cruel words that at that moment, the bride laughed so hard she almost ped the microphone. Her mother wiped tears of joy from her eyes, enjoying the mockery. The guests shook their heads, whispering and laughing at the single mother. The elder sister felt her soul breaking. She wanted to run, to escape this cruel spotlight. She whispered to herself, "Stay strong, don't let them see you fall." And then, silence. The groom, who had been sitting quietly at his table, suddenly pushed back his chair. The sound echoed across the hall. Everyone turned. He rose slowly, his tall figure casting a shadow under the golden lights. His face was serious, his eyes cold and sharp. The bride froze, her smile fading. The groom walked toward the microphone. The hall grew tense. The music stopped. Guests who had been laughing moments ago now sat in complete silence. The bride stared at him, confused. Her mother frowned, trying to understand. The single mother looked up, shocked. Why was he standing? Why now? The groom reached for the microphone. His hand was steady, his face unreadable. He looked at the crowd, then at the bride, and finally at the broken sister. When he opened his mouth to speak, the entire room froze. The hall was silent. Every laugh, every whisper, every sound had died the moment the groom stood up. His tall frame commanded attention, and his eyes burned with a seriousness no one expected on such a joyful day. That he walked slowly toward the microphone, each step echoing like thunder in the decorated hall. The bride's smile had already vanished. Her hands trembled as she clutched her gown. The mother's laughter froze on her lips. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The groom finally reached the microphone. He looked at the bride, then turned his gaze to the single mother who sat in silence, her face lowered, her shoulders shaking. His voice, when it came, was calm but sharp enough to cut through the heavy air. "Enough." The single word struck harder than any shout. Guests blinked, stunned. The bride gasped, her cheeks flushing with fear. The mother tried to laugh, but no sound came out. The groom's voice grew stronger. "You mock her, but do you even know her story?" The hall stirred. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The single mother lifted her face slowly, her eyes meeting his for just a second. She shook her head, silently begging him not to speak further. But he did not stop. This woman, the groom said, pointing gently toward her, is not weak. She is not worthless. She has lived through storms you cannot imagine. The bride interrupted quickly, forcing a laugh. Darling, it's just a joke. Everyone is laughing. Don't take it so seriously. But the groom turned his head, his stare so cold that the bride's voice faltered. She sat back down, her lips pressed tight. He continued, You call her unwanted. You call her a used product. Yet none of you know the sacrifices she has made. None of you know how strong she had to be when everyone else abandoned her. The hall grew tense. Some guests avoided his gaze, ashamed. Others leaned forward, eager. To hear more, the single mother covered her face with her hands, her tears unstoppable. She wanted to disappear. She had kept her pain private for so long, and now it was being spoken aloud in front of strangers. But the groom's voice carried a strange weight, like he was not just speaking to defend her, but to reveal something deeper. That he turned toward the mother of the bride. You laugh at her, yet do you remember who carried the weight of this family when you could not? Do you remember who worked day and night when others chose comfort? You mock her, but you owe her more than you dare admit. Gasps spread across the hall. The mother's face darkened with anger, but she had no words to answer. The groom then faced the crowd. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and unflinching. You call her defective. I call her powerful. She did not break when life was cruel. She raised a son alone, with dignity. She survived where many of you would have failed. The hall was now silent, every word sinking into the air like a heavy stone. The bride looked away, biting her lip. The guests shifted, uncomfortable with the truth laid bare. The single mother whispered again, her voice trembling, Please, stop. But the groom shook his head slowly. No. Tonight, the truth must be spoken. Tonight, everyone will know who you really are. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he leaned closer to the microphone, his eyes never leaving hers, and as he prepared to reveal what only he knew, the entire hall held its breath. The hall was silent, waiting. The groom's last words hung in the air like heavy clouds before a storm. The single mother's eyes begged him not to continue, but he looked at her gently, as if to say, It's time. Then, his voice dropped lower, steady and calm. You laugh at her today, but do you know what she has endured? Let me remind you. The crowd leaned closer. The bride's smile had disappeared completely, her face pale. The mother shifted nervously in her chair. The groom began to speak, and his words painted a picture that drew everyone into the past. Years ago, the single mother had been a bride herself. She was young, filled with dreams and hope. She believed in love. She believed in forever. On her wedding day, her husband had promised the world. He had looked into her eyes and told her she was his everything, but promises fade. Within a few short years, her dream became a nightmare. Her husband grew cold, distant, cruel. He found excuses to stay away. Then, one morning, he left. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a note that said he wanted freedom. She was left alone, holding her newborn son in her arms. The world expected her to break. Many whispered she would never survive. Yet, she did. She worked through nights and days, doing small jobs no one else wanted. She skipped meals so her son could eat. She walked in the rain when she had no money for transport. She cried silently when no one could see, but every morning she stood tall again, ready to fight one more day. The groom's voice carried through the hall, each word filled with weight. While others slept, she worked. While others mocked, she endured. She never gave up on her son. She never gave up on herself. Some guests lowered their heads in shame. A few women dabbed at their eyes with tissues. Even the men who had laughed earlier now sat in silence, unable to deny the truth. The single moth. Her tears fell freely now, but there was no shame in them, only the pain of old wounds being spoken aloud. She whispered again, "Please, don't." But the groom went on, his eyes sharp. "And do you know what makes this cruelty worse? When she was a child, she saved her sister's life." The hall gasped. All eyes turned to the bride. She froze, her face turning red, her lips trembling. The groom continued, his voice calm but piercing. "Yes. Once, when they were children, her sister nearly drowned in a river. It was she who jumped in. She who fought the current. She who risked her life to pull her sister back. And yet today, that same sister mocks her, calls her worthless. Tell me, is this justice?" The hall erupted in whispers. The bride looked down at her hands, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The mother shifted angrily, but her lips pressed tight, trapped between rage and fear. The single mother sat frozen, her heart torn between humiliation and a strange relief. Someone had finally spoken her truth. The groom's voice lowered again, soft but powerful. "You call her a burden. I call her a survivor. You call her shame. I call her courage." He turned to the bride and the mother. His eyes were dark, unyielding. "And tonight, the world will see who you really are." The room was tense, filled with whispers and nervous glances. The bride sat stiff, her face pale, her hands clenching the folds of her gown. The mother pressed her lips tight, anger burning in her eyes, but she did not speak. The guests were no longer laughing. Their eyes were wide, fixed on the groom who stood like a man unshaken, a man with more to say. That he turned his gaze back to the single mother, and then his words broke the silence again. "You think I do not know her? You believe she is only your sister, your daughter, a woman you can insult freely? You are wrong. I knew her before this day. I knew her long before I met this bride." The bride's eyes widened in shock. She shook her head violently. "No! That's not true! You're making this up!" But the groom ignored her protest. He spoke calmly, his voice steady, each word like a hammer striking a wall. "Years ago, before fate brought me here, I was a man who had lost hope. I was broken, just as she was broken. One night, in the cold of winter, I saw her. She was walking home with her little son, carrying heavy bags while the world rushed past her. Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. But she still smiled at her son, even with pain in her eyes." The hall was silent, as if the very walls were listening. The groom's eyes softened as he spoke. "That night, I realized something. I realized strength is not in riches, or status, or pride. Strength is in sacrifice. Strength is in love. She did not know me then. She never even saw me. But I saw her. And I remembered her. That image stayed with me, the image of a mother who refused to fall." Gasps rippled through the guests. Heads turned, eyes darted between the single mother and the groom. The bride's hands trembled. Her lips quivered. "Stop!" she cried. "Why are you saying this? Why are you humiliating me on my own wedding day?" The groom looked at her coldly. "Humiliation? You call this humiliation? Then what did you do to your sister tonight? You dragged her name through the dirt in front of strangers. You laughed at her pain. You mocked her survival. If anyone has humiliated themselves tonight, it is you." The bride's face burned with shame. She tried to smile, but her voice cracked. You love her? Is that what this is about? You pity her?" The hall fell silent again, the question hanging heavy in the air. The single mother's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. She shook her head in disbelief. No, this cannot be," she whispered under her breath. The groom looked at her, his voice gentle but firm. Love is not pity. And yes, I respect her more than anyone else in this hall. A wave of murmurs swept across the hall. Guests whispered to one another, some nodding in agreement, others watching the drama unfold with fascination. The mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with fury. You will not speak this nonsense in front of me. You are marrying my daughter. Not her. The groom turned his gaze toward her, calm and unshaken. Perhaps tonight, things will not go as you planned. The hall gasped again. The bride's body stiffened as if struck by lightning. Her eyes filled with panic, her hands clutching her gown tighter. The single mother sat frozen, her heart racing. Was this man truly about to end everything here? The groom's eyes moved back to the crowd. Tonight, everyone will learn that truth cannot be buried. No matter how deep. No matter how cruel the lies. He paused, his voice lowering into a whisper that carried across the hall, and the truth is only just beginning. The hall felt like it was holding its breath. Chandeliers glimmered above, but their beauty no longer mattered. The laughter had died. The bride's face was pale, her mother's eyes burned with fury, and the guests sat frozen, waiting for what would happen next. The single mother's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole. She whispered softly, almost begging, please, don't say more. This is her wedding day. But the groom shook his head slowly. His voice was calm but powerful, cutting through the silence like a blade. No! This is not just her wedding day. This is the day when truth must rise. Tonight, cruelty ends. The bride stood suddenly, her hands trembling, her voice desperate. Stop! You are my groom. You stand here to marry me, not to defend her. Why do you shame me like this in front of everyone? The groom turned to her, his expression unflinching. Shame? Shame comes from your own actions. From the poison in your words. From the way you mock the very person who once saved your life. Do you think marriage can be built on cruelty? On lies? Gasps spread through the hall. Guests leaned closer, whispering to one another. The bride's face twisted with rage. You cannot speak to me this way. I am the bride. This is my day. But the groom raised his voice, steady and clear. And she is your sister. A woman who carried pain you will never understand. A woman who endured storms while you stood safe in comfort. And yet, instead of respect, you chose to spit on her dignity. The mother slammed her hand on the table. Enough! Do not forget who I am. You are marrying my daughter. You will not embarrass this family with your false stories. The groom's eyes snapped toward her. His voice dropped lower, colder. False stories? Then let me remind you. It was she, your elder daughter, who worked when you could not. It was she who carried tea. He weight of this house when you hid behind pride. You fed on her strength, yet today you dare laugh at her weakness. The hall erupted in murmurs. Some guests nodded in agreement. Others whispered in shock. The mother's face turned red with anger, but she could not deny his words. The single mother buried her face in her hands. Tears ran freely, not from shame this time, but from the pain of wounds being exposed so brutally. She whispered again, please, stop, don't fight for me. But the groom stepped closer to her, his voice soft but firm. You don't see it, do you? You don't see how strong you are. You don't see the respect you deserve. The bride screamed, her voice cracking. Enough! Why do you keep speaking about her? Why do you look at her like that? Do you? She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Do you love her? The hall fell silent, as if time itself had stopped. Every eye turned toward the groom. The mother's face went pale. The guests leaned forward, waiting for his answer. The single mother's eyes widened in shock. She shook her head, whispering, "No, this can't be." The groom looked at her, his gaze steady, unshaken. His lips parted, ready to speak the words that would change everything, and then the lights flickered in the hall, the sound of electricity buzzing in the air, the entire wedding froze in eerie silence. The lights flickered once more, then steadied. A hush lingered in the hall, as if even the chandeliers waited for what was about to unfold. The bride stood trembling, her hands clutching her gown so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, like she was fighting to breathe. The groom stood tall, unshaken. His eyes did not leave hers. Guests sat forward in their chairs, waiting, their curiosity burning hotter with each second. The bride's voice cracked, her words sharp like broken glass. Why do you keep speaking about her? Why do you defend her? Why do you look at her like she is more important than me? The groom answered with calm strength. Because she is worth more than your mockery. She is worth more than this charade you call a wedding. Gasps swept across the room. The bride stumbled back a step, her face twisting in rage. You cannot say that. I am your bride. I am the one you chose. The groom's gaze hardened. Did I choose? Or was I trapped in a lie you and your mother wrapped in golden flowers? Whispers filled the hall, sharp and fast. The mother's face turned red, her lips trembling as she tried to hold her composure. The single mother sat frozen, her heart racing so hard she could hear nothing else. She wished she could vanish, wished the night would end, but something inside her whispered, the truth must come out. The bride snapped, her mask tearing apart. She is nothing, she screamed, pointing at her sister with trembling fingers. A single mother, abandoned, unwanted, broken. Why would anyone defend her? Why would anyone admire her? The groom's voice thundered, louder than any music that had played that night. Because she is stronger than anyone in this room. Because she has lived through fire and walked out alive. Because where others mocked, she endured. Where others betrayed, she stayed loyal. That is why. The hall erupted with gasps. Some guests even clapped softly, unable to hold back their respect. The bride's face twisted in panic, her eyes darting around the room as she realized the crowd was no longer on her side. Her mother rose to her feet, her voice trembling with fury. Enough! This is our family's honor. You will not destroy it with your nonsense. But the groom turned on her, his words like ice. Honor? What honor is there in mocking your own blood? What honor is there in laughing at sacrifice? Tonight, the world sees the truth. And the truth is, you are the ones without honor. The hall fell into shocked silence again. The bride's eyes filled with tears, but not from sorrow, only rage. She stomped her foot like a child. No! You belong to me. You will marry me, do you hear? You will stand with me at that altar. The groom shook his head slowly, his voice calm but final. No! I will not marry cruelty. I will not marry lies. The words hit the bride like a storm. She staggered back, nearly falling, her makeup streaking as tears finally broke free. She screamed, her voice echoing through the hall. You love her, don't you? Admit it! Admit it now! The single mother's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled. She wanted to protest, to deny, to run away, but her body would not move. The groom's eyes turned to her again, steady and clear. His lips parted, and then, in front of everyone, he spoke words that shattered the night. Yes. I do. The hall exploded with gasps, some shocked, some joyful, others whispering in disbelief, and the bride collapsed into her chair, her mask finally broken. The hall was in chaos. Guests whispered loudly, some covering their mouths in shock, others nodding as if they had known all along. The bride sat frozen, her makeup ruined, her gown crumpled, her chest rising and falling as she gasped for air. The mother clutched the edge of the table, her face pale with rage, unable to believe what she had just heard. The groom's words still echoed through the hall. Yes, I do. The single mother sat stiff in her chair, her heart pounding. Her tears had stopped, but her body trembled. She could not understand. How could this man, on his wedding day, confess such a thing in front of everyone? The groom stepped forward, his voice clear and firm. I will not marry lies. I will not marry cruelty. Tonight, this wedding ends. Gasps burst through the room like thunder. The bride let out a scream that pierced the silence. No! You cannot do this to me. I am the bride. You promised me forever. The groom turned to her, his face calm but sharp. Forever built on lies is no forever at all. You laughed at pain. You mocked sacrifice. You and your mother turned a celebration into cruelty. That is not love. That is poison. The mother finally found her voice, her anger shaking every word. How dare you? Do you know who we are? Do you know the shame you bring upon us by rejecting my daughter like this? The groom looked straight at her, unshaken. Shame? The only shame here is how you treated your own blood. The shame is in your laughter. The shame is in your heart. The hall stirred again, some guests nodding, others whispering words of agreement. It was no longer the bride's wedding, it had become a courtroom of truth, and everyone could see who was guilty. The bride's sobs grew louder, her body trembling. She tried to stand but collapsed back into her chair. No, this can't be happening. The groom walked past her without another war. His steps were slow, steady, each one echoing through the stunned silence. He stopped in front of the single mother, who sat frozen, unable to look up. He spoke softly now, his voice only for her. You have endured enough pain tonight. But hear me, you are not broken. You are not worthless. You are stronger than anyone here. And from this night on, you will never stand alone. Her lips parted, her eyes wide. She wanted to speak, but no words came. The bride screamed again, her voice shaking with fury. You cannot leave me. You cannot throw me away for her. She is nothing. Nothing. The groom turned, his eyes like steel. She is everything you could never be. Kind, brave, strong, and real. Those words fell like a hammer. The bride collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The mother sat rigid, unable to hide her shame. The guests looked on, many shaking their heads, some even standing to leave. The groom extended his hand to the single mother. For a moment, she hesitated. Could she really take it? Could she really rise after so much humiliation? Her son's face flashed in her mind, his smile, his innocence, his need for a strong mother. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. The hall erupted in whispers again, but this time they were not cruel. They were filled with awe, with respect. Some even clapped softly, unable to stop themselves. The groom looked around the room one last time. His voice rang clear. This is what karma looks like. Cruelty always destroys itself. But dignity survives. He turned, leading her away from the table, away from the laughter that had once broken her, and as they walked out of the hall together, the bride's sobs echoed behind them, proof that the cruelty she had sown had finally come back to her. Karma had spoken.